Hello, I'm Craig Allen, and today I'm going to give you a bit more of an overview of the PaxExam OpenNMS framework that has been created to help testing plugins in OpenNMS and indeed in any Karaf container. You may remember from the previous video that I had described a framework which allows you to use Docker Compose to set up a complete OpenNMS installation with all of its dependencies and then inject into that container a feature either as a car or as a feature.xml, and then run tests against that project using PaxExam, which injects a test probe into the container and then runs JUnit tests locally. So I went through a simple example last time. Now I'm going to go through an example which has been created to take the whole project further. And in this case, I'm going to look at testing a Camel based project that is running within OpenNMS. So the actual project you will see under PaxExam MISC examples, and then Karaf Camel, and then Karaf Camel example. The actual example itself, the application is taken from an example that is in the Karaf repository. So it's originally a Karaf Camel example, but I've extended it so we can see it being tested using the PaxExam framework. So within this module, you can see that we have a blueprint, we have a Java example, we have features. These are actually modules that existed already in the original project, but now I've added in some extra modules that actually package the whole thing up as a car and that provide test examples in this test example project. So very quickly, what does the actual project do? Well, it can either run a Java configuration or a blueprint configuration to set up routes within Camel. So if I look at the blueprint very quickly, you can see that the route that's defined is essentially a REST service defined in Camel Blueprint XML. What does that REST service do? Well, if I show you in Rester, you can see here we have a GET request against this URL. If I send it, we will get an error, only post is accepted. But if I do a post with the right data, you can see that in this case I'm getting a reply back. So all of that is coming from the Camel application as it would be running within our example. What we actually want to do though is run tests against it as we build the example. And so if I show you a set of tests that have been written, first of all, the HTTP client tests basically do exactly the same as I showed you with the browser. So in this case, it's making effectively similar to this curl command. It's making a get to this URL. This one is doing a post to that URL. And there's another one further down that's doing a different post to the URL. And then there's a bit of code down at the bottom here that actually runs the individual tests in HTTP client. So if I run this test, run as JUnit test, it should come back quite happy. And it does. You can see the various output there. And it has finished. And all of those tests have run. Now, at the moment, this test is running just in the IDE directly against the URL as it is visible on my machine. It's not running within the container, it's running external to the container. What I also have is this Camel Blueprint test, which in this case, it actually starts off by installing the feature. Now it installs a couple of other bundles because they're needed for this and they aren't available in the normal Karaf. So it installs these bundles, then it installs the actual feature, and then after that it runs the test, and it's basically calling the same tests as were in that HTTP client test, but it's doing it from within the container in OSGI, and then at the end it's going to remove the feature. So that's the test I'm going to run. I've got a similar test here, but in this case it's actually doing the same thing, but it's doing with the Java example rather than with the blueprint example. So it's exactly the same, but it's running against a different feature. So let me just make this smaller and let me show you the logs coming out of Karaf. Now to get the whole thing running, you've got to start up your minimal Karaf. The Karaf container is running at the moment, so I'm going to get into that container, and then I am going to actually run a command that will start the Karaf terminal within the container. There we are, there's Karaf running, and now I'm going to do a log tail, which will allow us to see everything that's actually happening as we run the tests. So now what I need to do is to actually run the test itself. So going back to my IDE, the test is here, and I can right click on the test and run as a JUnit test. And we'll see that the package is being built up, and here we can see there's a remote call going on within the container. So the bundle's been installed, and various HTTP requests are going on. Those are all being driven by the unit test, and at the end everything's being taken back out again. And we can see that the actual JUnit test still thinking about it, and now it's passed. Okay, so there's quite a lot of logs going on here because I've got the logging fully turned on, but basically what we're doing is installing the feature, running the tests, and then uninstalling the feature, and that's what we can see happening in the container. So hopefully this will give you a bit more help in thinking about how you could create a plugin and install it in OpenNMS or just in Karaf. I've got extra stuff in here about creating car files and installing car files directly rather than using a PaxExam, if that's what you wish to do. And of course there's the PaxExam example in here, which actually runs the JUnit tests directly within PaxExam. There's also an example of running the tests externally and installing the feature using commands that are directly put into Karaf using SSH from the Maven build. So quite a few things in the project. Hopefully you'll find it useful. Thank you for your time.